Good morning or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're joining us from for the Promoting Safety on Every Project webinar. I'd like to start off by thanking all of you for joining us. We've got a fantastic group of attendees. Before we get into the content that we've prepared, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. First of which, if you're not logged in with your computer, I would encourage you to go back to the registration information that you got for this webinar and get onto your computer, because we have a lot of really great demo content that our presenters are going to be sharing with you. Next is, if you do have any connectivity issues throughout the webinar, you can chat with us via the Zoom console. We will be monitoring that throughout the webinar this morning, so if you have any connectivity issues, let us know and we will do our very best to resolve those with you. I would suggest throughout the webinar today that you put your screen into full screen mode. That icon is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. That will allow you to have the best view possible for the demo. We will also be doing Q&A towards the end of our agenda. So for that Q&A, you can use the Q&A functionality in Zoom to submit your questions. And then I will go ahead and serve those up for our presenters, and we will take care of those. For any that we don't get to during the live webinar, we will take the time to respond to those via email afterwards. And last but certainly not least, I want to make sure that everyone knows you will get a recording to the webinar a couple of days after. So you'll receive that link and we'll have access to share that with other individuals across your organization and go back to it after. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce the presenters that we have today. We have a really great agenda planned out. And first, I'd like to introduce Danny. Danny is our VP of Product here at Numetric, where Danny is responsible for driving our roadmap of traffic safety analytics solutions. And in Danny's role, Danny has an inherent skill for understanding customer challenges and advocating for their needs in producing industry-leading solutions. And he is joined by Jake Mwai, our Senior Customer Success Manager. Danny and Jake have a great agenda prepared for us today. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Danny and Jake.
Thank you very much, Heather. Awesome. Jake and I are very passionate about this, so we're excited to speak with you. Before we jump into the demo, I want to touch on what we will be covering in this meeting today. We're going to cover why safety isn't considered on every project. We're going to discuss how a new approach to data can change this, how this new approach looks in a live cloud-based application, and how agencies like yours can implement this approach. So to begin, let's start with the highway safety management process. Step one is network screening. If you didn't see our webinar in February on network screening, you can still access it at numetric.com. Network screening helps you understand what section of road you should work on. Once you understand what section you should work on, you're asked to create a diagnosis of that road to understand what's happening on that roadway. FHWA thinks about diagnosis like this. The objective of diagnosis is to understand the crash patterns and identify the underlying factors contributing to crashes at sites identified from network screening. So what does it mean to understand crash patterns and the underlying factors? What we're looking for are crashes that share similar attributes. The understanding is that if we're looking at specific segments of road where specific crash attributes are occurring, a single treatment can alleviate those crashes. Obviously, the more crashes with similar attributes, the more that can be fixed with a single treatment. And then our benefit cost ratio would go up. So once we understand the crash groups for our segments, we can proceed to countermeasure selection. Once again, let's look at how FHWA describes countermeasure selection. They say the objective of countermeasure selection is to identify potential countermeasures and selects the most effective countermeasures to address or mitigate the underlying safety issues identified in diagnosis at the specific site. This is very straightforward. I understand what crashes are happening. I find the countermeasures that address them. Pretty simple. Interesting thing is, most people understand this within the context of a safety project. However, the FHWA actually goes even further to say what type of projects countermeasure selection and diagnosis should be considered on. They say the results enable decision makers, planners, highway designers, and traffic engineers to consider safety-motivated projects in conjunction with resurfacing, rehabilitation, reconstruction, and expansion projects. So FHWA calls out that projects that historically aren't considered to be safety projects, for example, resurfacing or rehab, I believe it's key to point this out. If we're not considering safety on every type of project we do, we're missing valuable opportunities to increase safety. So let's talk about the current state of diagnosis and countermeasure selection. How is it done? So the first thing to do a diagnosis is you actually query the data and get a good data set. This usually isn't a single query. It's finding information across a wide variety of databases to get a good understanding. Next, you combine that information into the tools you have, and it usually takes 2 or 3 tools to get all the information into one place and then analyze it. Now, there's really 2 ways that this can be done. All of this has to be done, but there's 2 manners to do it, either internally or contract it out to a consultant to perform the analysis. Either way, you have to query the data and you have to combine it and analyze it in these disparate tools. Now, there are levels of pains for both of these methods, in-house or contracted. However, there's a single characteristic which prevents safety from being performed on every project. To perform diagnosis and countermeasure selections, it's a significant investment of time and resources. These resource constraints set off a chain reaction that prevents safety from being considered on every project. So let's dive into what this reaction looks like. So safety reports are foundational for understanding the diagnosis project. As we've discussed this process with agencies, the reports differ. How they create safety reports differs. However, there are key components to each one of them, and they include a specific segment of road, the types of crashes that occur on that road, the severity of crashes within these crash bodies, and recommendations of what countermeasures could mitigate these bodies of crashes. Now, something that we should discuss briefly is these safety reports are only impactful if they're made accessible to the people working on the project in a timely manner. If they aren't there when the person's working on it, they're worthless. So let's turn to the challenges of creating of diagnosis and countermeasures. One of the biggest pain points to creating these, we've already touched on once, but it's getting all the information together. The information isn't together, which means there's a difficulty in making a single report. So a single report can take weeks to make. What this does, and let's talk about the significance of why is the timeliness of this so important? So we went through and we actually analyzed how many projects were somewhere in the development state or development process within a small to medium-sized state. And we found that there's over 1,000 projects somewhere in that cycle. So if we were to do safety analysis for every one of those 1,000 projects, and let's say that we were lucky and they all took between 1 and 2 weeks, we would need a staff of between 20 and 40 full-time employees only looking at safety analysis reports to fulfill these. That's a lot. That's a lot of resources to put towards a single report. So this is why only certain reports, certain projects get safety reports. It's never been feasible to create reports for every project. So if only certain projects are going to get these safety reports, it makes sense to begin with safety projects because you know there's a safety issue. But what this means is the majority of projects go without fulfilling the diagnosis and countermeasure steps. and there's no safety report to work from. When safety is not overtly called out on a project, it's easy to overlook, especially when the people working on it are not the safety group. What this means is, without a consistent reinforcement of the need of safety, the culture of safety is diminished. Ultimately, agencies are missing great opportunities, and the agency's ROI on safety is minimized and diminished. So, what makes Numetric's approach to diagnosis and countermeasure selection different? It's probably no surprise to anybody who's talked to Numetric, but it all begins with the data. The base data that DOTs have to work with is not easy. This includes spatial data, relational data, and various other types of data. There's a technical challenge to house all of this data in a single location, let alone combine the data to find meaningful insights. So on this note, I actually just got back Tuesday from the US DOT Safety Data Forum 2.0. And at this conference, Undersecretary of Transportation for Policy, Derek Kahn, said, "Data integration is one of the greatest unlocks of our lifetime." He would then go on to state that Silicon Valley, social media, and retail have all excelled at integrating data, and discussed how this needs to be a focus in transportation. At Numetric, we completely agree. This is foundational to everything we do. But as we've spoken with states, they relate to us that integrating data is hard, especially because they're being told that in order to combine their data, they must migrate, reformat, or reconstruct their data. This isn't true. It's not what we're hearing from our partners. What we're hearing from our partners is this: Numetric is great because they don't force you to change your data to work with their products. Numetric takes the data we already have and makes it work with their tools. You can begin using the data you have now. We've developed a platform to meet states where they're at with the data they have. And by using the data you already have, it makes creating a data roadmap so much easier going forward. So to facilitate this data integration, Numetric has constructed a robust platform that is meant to take various data sets and combine them. This is called Numetric's Traffic Safety Data Platform. The first way the Numetric platform addresses the challenges of data is through enhanced searchability. For data to be used, it must be read by humans. So if you think about it this way, when an officer inputs a manner of collision into a report, it's given a number or a code. To the system, that's the only way it understands this crash. It's no longer an angle crash, it's now a number 4 crash. Our platform transformed those numbers or codes into human readable language. Going even further, we apply logic to data to create searchable transformations. Countermeasure transformations are a great example of how having more data can give you even greater insight. Our rumble strips countermeasure combines crash data, asset data, and LRS data in order to create a transformation. With our partners, we create logic for when a crash can be mitigated by specific countermeasures like rumble strips. Once this is done, users can query the word rumble strips to see where all of their crashes that could have been mitigated by rumble strips occurred. The next way the Numetric platform addresses the challenges of data is through enforced consistency. Numetric understands that there is a level of trust that must be achieved in order for organizations to adopt software. And data consistency is at the heart of that trust. Beyond the normal QA and QC processes, Numetric provides reports based on the data provided. Consider crash reports. Crash reports can include a mile point and a geo point. Numetric creates reports to understand when those pieces of information contradict. And we can even help you understand which one of them is correct. The third way we address these challenges is by delivering performance. From its foundation, Numetric was built with 3 things in mind: big data, speed, and usability. The normal expectation when working with an analytics tool is that you will need to use SQL and that it's going to take a long time to work with. Numetric uses natural language searches to perform queries. So if you can use Google, you can use Numetric. Also, most of our search results are instantaneous. This provides users at all technical levels with an easier, better experience that allows for wider adoption and higher usage. So on top of Numetric platform sits Numetric's line of purpose-built applications, one of which we're going to discuss today, which is the safety analysis application. These apps are easy to use and powerful, which leads to greater adoption. These apps enable faster, deeper analysis. One thing to point out is, as Numetric builds out the apps, we work with industry's professionals. As we worked on this new safety analysis app, we worked with over 50 traffic and safety designers, planners, engineers, and directors. It's been great seeing the commitment that these groups have to safety. One of my favorite things I was told came from Jeff Lewis at UDOT. He said, UDOT's focus is always to improve safety on Utah's roadways, and that is why we have partnered with Numetric to build the safety analysis application. The application helps make it easier and more accessible for everyone working on roadway projects in Utah to focus on and invest in improving roadway safety. So how does Numetric make safety more accessible to everyone? The question that starts really is, when is safety considered? The best measurement we have for when safety begins to be considered is when are safety reports created. And as we've spoken with various agencies, we found that safety really starts being considered in the final design, which is very problematic. I should say the safety reports are being created in the final design, and that's very problematic because that means that there's a good chance that the design is already created before the safety report is even given to the designer. So as we met with these professionals to make the safety reports correct, we asked, when do you want these reports? And without fail, we heard, we want them as early as possible in the planning stage. So that's our goal. Provide safety reports as early and as often as needed. With Numetric, it doesn't matter what stage your project is in, you can create safety reports. These reports can even provide different insights at each stage of the process. So whether you're at the diagnosis stage or the countermeasure selection, you can ensure by having safety considered at every step that you are creating a culture of safety. And when safety is considered on all projects, agencies begin seeing a maximum return on investment across all projects. So it's about time to start looking at the safety analysis app that we've talked a lot about. But before we do, a little bit of a cliffhanger, let's actually walk through it so we understand what we're about to see. There's 4 major parts to the safety analysis app. The first is the project page. The project page is an overview of those treatments and those things that you want to do on this project. It's laid out pretty simply. At the top, you have a map. Right below it, you have the route and the mile points that you're working within. Below that, you have applied treatments. Now, these are the treatments that you've decided that you want included in this project. You also see the location of those treatments, the benefit you get by applying this treatment in these locations, and the benefit cost ratio. Next, there's the recommendations page. Once again, you see the same map. Below the map, you actually have the crashes by mile points. They're broken into 0.3 of a mile points. You can view these crashes in one of 2 ways, either total crashes or by crash cost, based on your CABCO cost. On the right side, everything is very specific to the countermeasures that could be applied to these crashes. You see the top 3 countermeasures, their maximum benefit, and their unique value. Below that, you see the benefits for the top recommendation, annual cost savings, annual crash reduction, annual severe crash reduction. Below that, you see another crashes by mile point. This one is specific to the countermeasure you selected, and this one can either be viewed by total crashes or benefits. The third piece of the safety analysis app is the treatment section. Now in the treatment section, you have the treatment you can select. Below it, you have the project cost that you can input, and that gives you your benefit cost ratio. You have your service life and your CMFs. Now you can change your service life or CMFs. These are put in by default by the state using the state's CMF or CMFs. But if an engineer is working and she decides that she has a better CMF to work with, she can input that. Now we do call it out and we'll let you know that the CMF has been changed from the state default so that there can be a conversation and you can understand maybe we need to improve our CMFs, or maybe the CMF shouldn't be used in this situation. And then on the right, you see, once again, the benefit cost ratio, the benefits, annual cost savings, annual crash reduction, and annual severe crash reduction. And then the last piece of the safety analysis app is the safety report. You shouldn't see anything new really in the safety report. It is everything you've just gone over, but now it's put into a super well framed report that you can send out to stakeholders that explain exactly what's happening on the project and show why you're doing the work you're doing. So now, let's do a live demo. You ready, Jake?
Okay.
Okay. We're going to bring Jake in on this one, and Jake's going to walk us through these. So let's talk about how we're going to structure these live demos. We've talked a lot about how this can fit in anywhere in the cycle. So Jake, let's start off with one that everybody's familiar with, which is create me a safety report that's just ad hoc. Someone comes in and says, hey, I need a safety report for Route X. So walk us through how we would just do an ad hoc safety report.
Okay. So we've opened Numetric safety analysis application. We can simply start a new analysis. So we can click on new safety analysis, and we can add the route that we want to look at. In this case, let's look at Route 30. Let's do a 2-mile stretch. Let's go from 104 to 106. So as soon as I enter that in, as Danny has showed, I now can visualize where this section of road is on a map. And now let's go into add a treatment. Let's dive a little bit deeper into what's going on along this section of road, and let's do it quickly. Okay, so now I can, I'm taken to this recommendations page, and I have my top 3 countermeasures that are shown to me that are recommended: shoulder barrier, clear zone improvements, and passing lane. These are all provided and ordered based on the maximum benefit. And I can toggle through each of these different countermeasures, but let's stick with the number 1. Let's stick with shoulder barrier. I have the crash distribution along that segment of road based on the mile point summary that Danny has pointed out. And again, I can view that either by number of crashes, or I can do that by cost, which help me identify those serious and fatal crashes. So now that I kind of have a view of what recommendations there are and what I could actually do, let's say I want to look at the raw data a little bit closer. So let's go to a metrics tab. This tab provides a summary of data for all the crashes that have occurred along this section of road. I can look at the severity distribution, when these crashes are occurring, what time of day, what are the harmful events occurring along this section of road. It looks like there were quite a few overturn rollover car crashes, some occurring in the ditch. And as I scroll down, I get more information about the vehicle, what type of collisions, what were the lighting conditions at the time of the crash, as well as roadway conditions. So here, a user is able to go through and quickly understand and identify what type of attributes are occurring along this section of road with each crash. Now, if I wanted to get down into the raw data, each individual crash, I can select on the raw data tab, and I can download this data in Excel, or I can visualize it here in this table view in Numetric. But let's hop back to recommendations. So now that we have some recommendations, let's quickly see what we might want to do. And so I get all the calculations of what my benefit could be, what the annual cost savings and crash reduction is. But I can also go below to see, okay, if I were to install shoulder barrier, where are those crashes occurring and where can I mitigate them? So I want to look at it by benefit. And so I noticed very quickly that there are 2 very large spikes within that section of road that I don't necessarily need to install a shoulder barrier along the entire 2-mile section of road. So let's highlight a small section where we can still get the maximum amount of benefit with shoulder barrier. So I've identified this and zoned it down to about a 1-mile section of road. And I can simply come down and say, what would happen if I install guardrail? So I'm going to click on install guardrail, and I'm brought to the benefit cost analysis page where my begin and end mileposts filter has persisted. So I'm looking at just that 1 mile section of road, and I can add a project cost. So let's say this is going to cost me $300,000. I simply type in the cost, and instantly my benefit cost ratio is calculated, as well as the annual cost savings, crash reduction, and severe crash reduction. But as Danny said, sometimes the CMS might change from the default. So let's go to the minor CMS and change it from 0.56 to 0.45 for those minor crashes. That quickly, benefit cost is updated, and as Danny highlighted, I can tell if I give this report or share this query with anyone that there has been a change in the CMS. So now that we have the benefit cost ratio, let's add a treatment. So we select add that treatment, and I'm brought back to the project summary page to see what potential treatments have been added, what the benefit was, as well as the benefit cost ratio. Now that we've added a treatment, I can continue to add more treatments, or I can create a report. So let's create a report. And let's title this Route 30, milepost 104 to 106. And maybe this was requested by the mayor. And we'll create that report. And very quickly, I have a cleanly formatted report showing my location of a potential project, the extents of the data that I'm actually using, in this case from 2010 to 2019, a summary of the types of crashes that are occurring along this segment of road, as well as a treatment overview. In this case, we've added one treatment, guardrail, and I'm presented with the benefit cost ratio, as well as the other annual crash reductions that we've discussed and seen in the application. I'm brought down to the default values that were used. So you can see we've highlighted that CMF change so that when this report is given to a designer, or when there are another set of eyes on it, they understand very quickly and easily what changes have been made from standard or default CMFs. And as I scroll down, I still get the recommended countermeasures that were recommended for the entire 2 mile route that we selected, along with the calculations of crash reductions. Underneath that, I get that metrics tab showing and providing information of the aggregated crash attributes and roadway attributes along. So very quickly, I've been able to create a report that is 1, digestible, 2, informational, and 3, can be created during any section or any part of the project planning, whether we start at the scoping phase, preliminary design, conceptual design, and so forth.
Awesome. So let's recap what we just went through, because quite honestly, Jake did a ton there, and he did it very quickly. So to begin, Jake only had extents of a route. That's all he began with. Based on this route, he created a safety project. The safety project identified types of crashes on this route. Based on the crash types, recommendations identified countermeasures. Jake understands the number of total crashes and serious and fatal crashes that would be reduced by implementing treatments based on these countermeasures. And Jake was able to calculate a benefit cost ratio for all of this work. So when you think that Jake came to the table with basically nothing, and within minutes, he already has that much insight into what's happening on this road and what could happen on this road depending on the treatment, it's actually pretty amazing to think about. I would tell you good work, Jake, but I think that the software has something to do with it. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so Jake, we talked about earlier, diagnosis really comes after network screening. So how does this work with network screening?
Okay, let's start from the network screening phase and actually having a ranked list of segments to be prioritized by the agency. Now, before I get started, I had recently a conversation with a government agency where an FHWA rep came and started to ask them a lot of questions about the funding that they were going to receive, and what safety measures were going to be incorporated with this list of projects that the money was going to go towards. And so they asked simple, basic questions. How are you going to incorporate safety in this? What will be the annual crashes reduced along with these projects? And a lot of other questions that the agency simply wasn't able to answer because of lack of time, lack of resources. And what we realized is in this network screening phase, creating a list and prioritizing sections is critical and important, but it's not sufficient anymore. We need to know with these segments what types of crashes can be mitigated, what countermeasures we should be recommending, how many crashes are going to be reduced along this section of road, and the benefit that they're going to get from the money that's being spent on these projects. So I'm in the Numetric network screening application where I want to create a list, a new ranking based on the city that I currently live in. So I'm going to type in my city name and I'm going to type in Murray. And very quickly, I'm brought to the city of Murray. I get a heat map of the segments of road as well as a table that is showing me and screening my network based on currently the total number of crashes that are occurring along the section, each segment of road. I have my city ranking as well as my state ranking. But let's say I want to rank my roads based on and prioritize them based on the crash rate. So I'm going to click on crash rate and everything is re-ranked, rescreened, and updated that quickly. So I'm going to select the top segment of road. I get some additional information, a Google Street View of where I'm at, but what I really want to do is understand what safety measures I can incorporate. So I'm going to take this segment and open it in safety analysis. So I'm taking directly to safety analysis from our network screening application, filtering down the data to this particular segment from data sets that include crash data sets, vehicle data set, AADT, traffic volume data, roadway attributes, asset information for this particular segment of road. Now, due to time and resources, I can't look into all 50 segments right now, so I'm just going to simply go and create a report. So that quickly I can say, you know, this is network screening number 1 for the city of Murray, and maybe this was requested by Mayor Court. And I'm going to create that report. And again, this is a report that you've seen. But that quickly, I can create a safety report. And as I scroll down, I get the summary of information and I get the recommendations of what can I do here? Where can I get the maximum benefit? How many crashes can be reduced here annually? I have those calculations at my disposal for the number 1 ranked segment in my city. Now, because that was pretty easy and simple to do, I'm going to hop back to my network screening application. I'm going to click on the number 2 segment and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open this in the safety analysis application, pull in the data for that segment, and I'm going to create a report with network screening number 2 for the city of Murray, again requested by the mayor. And as I create that report and as I keep these files together, showing my ranked list as well as safety implications, I can now come to number 2 ranked segment and notice my max benefit, my annual crashes reduced, and you can see for this number 2 segment, left turn phasing change has a maximum benefit of about $4.5 million, while the annual crash reduction is almost 5. If I go back to the previous safety report, I notice a $2 million max benefit with the annual crash reduction between 1 and 2. And so that quickly I'm able to take the segments of road that are prioritized and incorporate and understand safety into what can be implemented And it gives the user, it gives really the entire department an insight into why we're prioritizing these and what we can do to help. Now, because that was so easy, I'm going to go ahead and do this for all 50 segments.
Well, I don't know that we're going to do it for all 50. Let's stick with 2. Let's actually, Jake did a good job. Let's talk about this before Jake on his free time goes and does all 50 segments. So Jake helped us understand that having a ranked list isn't good enough. You must understand what crashes can be mitigated. This provides you the annual benefits, crashes reduced, and benefit cost ratios. So Numetric Safety Analysis app made us aware that there is a greater opportunity for impact on a certain segment ranked lower because there were more mitigatable crashes. And it provides the information in a way that's easy to explain both internally and externally. So good job. All right, so Jake, to a degree, those have kind of both been softballs pitched to you because those are both within the ballpark of safety, right? But as we were reading that FHWA quote, it said that we're supposed to be doing this on like rehab projects. So how would you even incorporate this into rehab projects?
Okay, let's take a look. As we all know, rehab projects move very quickly. Because of that, safety sometimes doesn't get incorporated in it, or it does late in the game. And so what we want to do is let's look at a section of road where there is going to be, maybe we're in the scoping and design phases. So let's add a new treatment, or sorry, add a route. Let's do route 25. It's just a 10-mile section. Maybe they're going to repave the whole road. So let's add that. And let's just go directly to create report. So let's give this a title. Route 25, let's do 0 to 10. Let's do Route 25 rehab. So we'll do Route 25 requested by rehab. So that quickly, we've been able to identify and take the route extents of where we know they're planning to do a rehab project. And we brought in all the safety information that we need to understand what can be done on this section of road. So there are 2 options. One, we could just send this report right out to the design team. Or we can take a few extra minutes, scroll through this report, and notice that there's not a lot of crashes occurring along this section of road. 2, there's not a big maximum benefit based on treatments that we would want to incorporate during a rehab project. And so what this provides is that back check of feeling confident and knowing that we've looked at safety for this rehab project. There isn't always a safety measure to be incorporated in every single project, but it is critical that we have, kind of as Danny said, we cultivate a culture of incorporating safety into every single thing we do. So we can send this off to the designer and leave it at that. There may not be anything for that. So I'm gonna go to a rehab project, another one that would potentially have some additional treatment. So let's select another route. Let's do Route 91. We'll do a 5-mile segment from 25 to 30. We'll add that, and we have a little bit more time to look into this, even though this is still in the scoping or planning phase. So let's go ahead and add a treatment. We've seen this recommendation page before. We know we're doing a rehab project, that there are particular treatments and countermeasures that we want to look at. Now, as we look at the top 3 countermeasures, left turn phasing change, friction improvements, and traffic signals. Now, friction improvement sounds like something that we could incorporate during a rehab project. So I'm going to select on that countermeasure. I'm going to add a filter for the crashes that could be mitigated by friction improvements. And again, now I can look at the crash distribution and the benefit distribution of where I can grab the most benefit along this section of road. Right off the bat, we can see that high spike down here towards the end of this particular segment. So and if you look at the map, the crashes that aren't incorporated into this section of road and friction improvement as a countermeasure go gray, and the crashes that do include friction improvements are brought forward. But now I'm going to go and see what does it look like if I apply high friction surface course. I select that. My begin and end mileposts show that quarter mile, and I'm going to add a project cost of $200,000. Again, as you've seen, I add that. My benefit cost ratio is instantly calculated, and I can select add treatment. I'm good with the CMFs and the service lifetime. But I did notice there were some other spikes and other sections of the road that I may want to incorporate or may want to look at. So again, I'm going to go back to friction improvement. I'm going to go back to that countermeasure and select that. I'm going to add a filter again for the section of road or for the crashes that can be mitigated by friction improvements. And I'm going to, let's look at the costs again. It looked like there's another section where I may want to incorporate high friction surface course. So I'm going to select that about 2 mile section of road, and I'm going to do the same thing, run through the same process. This may cost me about $1 million. So I type in my costs, which we can iterate on as you go throughout the process of project planning, from scoping and planning to conceptual design to preliminary design. These costs can be updated as you move along the phases of a project. So now I'm back to my project report page where I see applying high friction surface course at 2 different locations along this section of road for pavement rehab, giving me a very great benefit and benefit cost ratio. From there, I can create a report, give it a name, and send this out to designers.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. So going through this, Jake's gone through 3 different scenarios where this would fit in 3 different places. So it's been truly helpful for me, but I think it's awesome. But one other thing that we've had discussed with us is that now, like, a team doing rehab could actually go into treatments and see, actually, we're not going to do anything with this left turn facing change, but we can send this over to the safety team and say, hey, we actually believe in your guys' arena, there's something that we could do here. And actually, the thing that's the most amazing about that is now there's more and more questions and conversations happening around safety. And so that, I believe, is actually the biggest benefit of this is safety becomes a conversation that everybody's a part of. So with that, we'll turn the time back over to Heather.
Perfect. We are going to do question and answer. And to kick that off, I have a couple of questions that have come in for you guys. So let me get to these questions. I also want to say for all the attendees, if you have additional questions, we'll take the next little bit here to answer those. So you can get into the Q&A tab that is in Zoom and enter your questions there, and I will serve them up for Danny and Jake to answer. So the first question that came in was, can I still use safety analysis if I don't have full or any asset data set?
Yeah, Danny, I'll take that one. Absolutely. There are critical calculations that go into providing a benefit cost analysis, and that's how you essentially prioritize the different projects you're going to work on. Now, the countermeasure recommendation, those become more powerful as you have more data. Meaning, as you have traffic volume data, as you have roadway attributes, and more and more crash attributes, the countermeasure selection, it's not a set piece of logic. It's going to continue to grow and become enhanced as, 1, we work with our partners, 2, we work with FHWA and we've looked at their proven countermeasure selections. But having asset data is critical in not recommending countermeasures where they already exist. So we can still move forward in using the safety analysis tool, and there's tremendous benefit from using it with the data you have. As Danny mentioned, Numetric has built this platform in a way where we want to meet states where they're at. There's so many varying levels of data, quality, data control, and just data in general across the country that Numetric has realized we need to be flexible enough to accept states where they are and come up with a plan in meeting them where they're at and helping them progress.
Perfect. Thanks, Jake. The next question is, how do you create crash type grouping?
Yeah, good question. So piggybacking on what Jake just said, the FHWA has some pretty good guidelines out there about proven countermeasures. And so in working with states, states understand this. States understand that countermeasures and treatments are address specific types of crashes. So the logic that we have working through our software goes through the attributes database, the LRS database, the crashes database, to quickly do the work that is understood in order to say what types of crashes could be addressed by treatment. And so really how we create them is based off of logic of what types of, like, we're not going to, let's give some examples, right? Understanding a crash that happened in an intersection. We are not going to do a non-intersection treatment in an intersection crash. So going through and understanding crash types, where they're happening and why they happen, like one of the examples we gave was high friction and surface treatment. One of the crash bodies that you look for those kind of treatments is wet conditions. You need to know that the road doesn't perform very well when it's not dry. So understanding those and building in the logic to quickly go through and get those crash bodies put together, that's how we go through and create these crash types.
So another question that we have is, how are crashes affected by treatment type determined?
So I'll continue to talk with that.
Yeah.
So that basically, like, is similar to what we were just talking about. Like, treatments address specific bodies of crashes. Like, take something like a run off the road. Rarely, I don't know that I've ever seen it, but rarely would you see a run off the road crash at an intersection. When you're talking about run off the roads, and you're talking about things like guardrails or rumble strips, you're talking about something that's more like a 2-lane road, run off the right, single car crash. And so making sure that those types of crashes and those types of treatments are mapped to each other, that's how we address crash types with treatments.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up just a little bit with that. And Danny kind of touched on it in his description of what Numetric is, but there's a data component that goes behind this that many of you may be saying our data is not good enough. We don't identify necessarily bicycle-related crashes very well, or run off the road. And I'll touch on it just quickly because this is probably a conversation for another webinar. But there are tools and there is capability of enhancing your data significantly in order to have great countermeasures, and in order for the entire department and the entire agency and consultants and everyone to really understand and utilize crash data much more efficiently. Maybe I'll just keep it at that.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, that concludes the content that we have prepared for today's webinar. We thank everyone for joining us today. Just a reminder that we will provide a recording of this webinar to everyone who's registered via email within the next few days. Again, thank you for your time, and we hope everyone has a great rest of your day.